the RTÉ Rugby World Cup podcast, sponsored by Bank of Ireland.
Welcome along to another RTÉ Rugby World Cup podcast. We're officially halfway through the tournament now. 24 games down, 24 to go, and we're starting to get a picture of how things might shape up as we head into the knockout stages. Ireland on a bye week, no game this weekend, which is probably going to come as a relief, I think, to a lot of the fans as well as the players after Saturday night in Paris. I think we all need a break after that. Jonny Holland is with me, one of our regulars on the podcast. And a big welcome, you saw him wave there right at the top of the show, to Mike McCarthy. Good to have you on the pod, Mike. Hope you're keeping well.
I'm good, lads. Thanks very much for having me. It's, just as you say, I think we've just about calmed down after what was an absolute cracking result of the weekend.
And with a second row and an out half with me, lineouts and place kicking are going to be two of the main areas of focus, I think, today. So we're well set. We'll get right into it. Ireland 13, South Africa 8 in Pool B is the main point to start off with. And Jonny, before we even talk about from an Irish point of view, even I would say from a neutral point of view, taking our own bias out of the equation, like if ever there was a game that showed up that the scoreboard doesn't necessarily matter, you don't need it to be a 30-all shootout, 4 or 5 tries apiece to have an absolute thriller. This was low scoring, but about as good as Test rugby gets.
Absolutely, and I think that's you see it reflected like with the amount of people that are speaking about it. Obviously, it's online, so maybe it's biased by who we come across. But like you see people who aren't Irish and aren't South African speaking about how highly contested the game was. But like if you look at, and I know you get into it, the Australia Wales game, much higher scoring, but the quality wasn't there, and we'll go into that later on. But like
in fairness, though, that was kind of captivating in its own way, just to see Australia implode. But I know I know the point you were getting at, like.
Yeah, if you look at, I watched a bit of it again this morning, and I was like, what is this? Like, individual carries and poor defense. But I know we'll get onto it later on. But the South African one, the Ireland-South African game, I think it was just like, you can argue, Ireland with nearly 5-second ball and all that, and the quality wasn't there as well. And there were errors, like Caelan Doris had 2 knock-ons that you don't see him making usually. He was unbelievably good around the ruck again, like he always is. But like there were some errors, but of course that's going to come from the opposition. I think that's what they did to each other. The Irish lineout wasn't great at the start, but again, South Africa probably have the best defensive lineout in the world. And they're putting 2 pods in the air, and there's a bit more messing going on there as well with who's in the lineout and who's not. So a bit of cheating in going on around the place. So like I think there was so much going on. I think it kind of captured people because of the ingenuity as well. Like there was different things going on in attack from Ireland, there were different things going on in defence from South Africa. So I think there was a lot going on there, and physically it was just it was right up there. I don't know if obviously our biases are in there as well. I was watching it, I was so tense and nervous. I don't think I've ever been as nervous for an international match and caring so much about it. But I think half that fear is having to speak about rugby for the next World Cup cycle and saying whether we got further or not, but I think the tension was unbelievable, and I think a lot of people felt that, whether they were Irish, South African or otherwise.
And like I sat down to rewatch it on Sunday afternoon. I think from start to finish it took me about 3.5 hours, because every couple of minutes there was something you were rewinding and looking back at it again and again and again. And Mike, we can kind of end up getting so negative a lot of the time when we talk about these matches, about low ball and play time and all these stoppages and going to TMO non-stop. But like, this just showed when the game is played in the right way and it's 2 teams with the right attitude and it still has all that physicality and all that brilliance. Like it's such an unbelievable game to be able to witness, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It was an absolutely incredible game. I mean, the physicality, it was barbaric at times, very, I suppose, that gladiatorial edge to it. Josh van der Vlier dislocating his finger or thumb, whatever it was, early on in the game. Collisions were massive. We knew what was coming from South Africa in terms of their line speed, the strength of their men, their size, their physicality. And, like we said, it just shows you don't need tries to kind of have an absolutely cracking game. It was the best game I've seen, best test match game I've seen in a long time. It was built up from the start with that kind of coach familiarity, the players knowing each other. The RG Snymers, the Jean Klein, his story behind playing 5 games for Ireland, was it, and then going to play for South Africa. The Rassie Erasmus, Jack Nienbar coming to coach Leinster. So there was a lot of story behind the game in itself coming into the game. So that made it even more exciting. But, you know, just Ireland really, really stood up. I think, 16 games on the trot now. They've won 28 out of their last 30 test matches they've won. They're in a great place. And, you know, what a massive positive to come out of that game with a clean bill of health. I think only Jack Conan, who obviously wasn't involved, hasn't been involved yet, will hopefully be fit because, you know, you need a bit of luck, don't you, going forward in the competition? How long can we keep Jonny Sexton fit for? You know, that's the South Africa game, the Scotland game, hopefully a quarter, a semi, and a final. I think everyone's praying every night that he can keep fit. But look, the strength and depth that's there. You know, we've seen in previous World Cups, probably one of the reasons I got caught up in 2015, the strength and depth wasn't there. It's there in abundance now, as we can see. One concern I had, and I'll be honest, I said it on the pre-game, you know, I was a bit, with the Bum squad, all the talk about the 7-1 split, I was a bit concerned about could two cracking players, Finlay Bealham, David Kilcoyne, could they front up, could they stand up, could they see the game out? And they just delivered in abundance. That scrum penalty at the end, that's going to give them massive confidence as going forward as well. But yeah, just the game, you know, edge of the seat stuff. I pissed my mum and stepdad off actually because we were watching it in the lounge. They were as excited as I was, but they were just constantly talking. I had to go next door and watch it in the spare room, so they were kind of wondering why I'd left the room. But yeah, just a brilliant game.
Yeah, can't imagine. I'm one of those where I wish I was there. I'll be there for Scotland for the game in Paris against Scotland. But God, to have missed that one at the weekend. Jonny, you had your weekly column on RTÉ.ie today, and you were talking about a good few things, but one thing specifically was about how Ireland just changed up their attack a little bit and put a little bit more width into their first phase. Not necessarily going completely wide, but just maybe a meter or two a little bit further wide of where they would normally attack. Can you, for those who haven't read it yet, and obviously I recommend that you do, can you just give us the cliff notes of it and what you were explaining in it?
Yeah, so like in phase play, we see Ireland playing kind of that 1-3-3-1 or a 1-3-2-2, whatever they're kind of playing at the moment. They're going to change between both. So those two pods of three in the middle of the field, the forwards, we generally see, you know, from an edge scrum half passing to the middle of that pod, so the middleman has a carry or a sweep pass to more than likely Sexton at the back. But I know we've seen James Lowe and Mac Hansen in that position as well. And when they get that pass out the back, they hit the next pod of forwards running off him, and they kind of move the point of contact quite a bit. But we've seen that, and like a lot of teams are running that shape. Scotland do it quite a bit. So you see that shape quite a bit. And then, you know, when you're coming up against that shape, I think the first carry, the middleman is you know, it's kind of like an arrowhead, so you know he's going to get the ball. Mm-hmm. And that's where the opposition defence are going to focus on, because if they can put him under pressure, maybe that sweep pass isn't on, so they can't move the point of contact, or he doesn't get a good carry. And once you don't get gain line in rugby, it's obviously a very neutralising thing, and you don't have quick ball after it, and then your attack comes down. So it's
I might interrupt you just for maybe the more passive rugby fans listening to this, like when you're saying the arrowhead formation, so you've your 3-3-1, so it's a pod of three players standing outside of the ruck, one kind of leading out the way and one inside him, and one inside him, and whoops, I just knocked over a big glass of water, and one outside him as well. So what you're explaining to us here is that, you know, that the man leading the arrowhead gets the ball and he has an option either side of him and is able to carry as well, yeah?
Absolutely. And you see, like, you call those passes like the minus on the inside or the plus on the outside or a tip. And we've seen Ireland do a bit of damage there. Peter Manie had one for, who did he give that to? And Bundyaki scored a try against England, wasn't it? So we see they've made a few line breaks from little short passes within that pod. So it is the middleman kind of promoting himself. And then they do have a lot of variation off it, in fairness to them. I think Ireland, of all the teams, have a lot of passes from that. It's not very, you know, predictable, but at the same time, it's predictable enough when you analyse them and you watch them for 18 months, knowing that they're going to be in your group, in your pool, that you know you're going to go hard at that person. And with the South African line speed and with the way they kind of lead their defence, you knew they were going to go after them. And I actually thought, so Ireland changed and they kind of hit the outside man, the third man in that pod, a couple of times. And at the start, I was wondering, were they just spooked? You know, I wasn't sure if they'd missed their pass or if they were kind of rushing things and gone to the outside man, because obviously it's a different picture altogether and they don't have the same kind of options off that. So I was wondering a small bit when I saw Jameson Gibson Park giving those passes. I was starting to get a small bit worried. I thought they were kind of, because you did see other times where Ireland were out of shape, and there was a carry from James Ryan, where it wasn't really planned. He was on his own and he just decided to carry, and Hugo Keenan came in late to clear him, and South Africa got a turnover. I think it was Jasper Wiese, but so I thought it was one of those kind of moments. But actually, when you see that, it really teed up. The Sexton was tucked in nice and narrow, and when the third man got it, he turned inside instead of outside to kind of use the inside man as his protection. Sexton got the ball at the back of that pod, and they moved it again with a kind of a front door and a back door option. So they had loads of options off it. But I think it was just something that we haven't seen from Ireland, and it was quite obvious after maybe 20 minutes that they were going for that. And then maybe even after that 20-minute period, going into the second quarter and into the second half, they kind of mixed it up between the middle man and the outside man. So I think it was great subtlety. Like, everyone thinks you have to change the whole thing completely to show a massively different picture, but all they're trying to get is a slightly softer shoulder to get slightly more go forward, and then the game becomes easier when South Africa are on the back foot. I don't think we got them on the back foot as many times as we thought we would, but there was intent there to challenge that defensive line speed, and you could see that the coaches obviously came up with something for South Africa in particular, you know.
And
Johnny, I was going to say, Johnny, there, that seems to be something. Like, I'm not going to pretend I know about backs play, but look, I think that's something that's really developed since the Joe Schmidt days, in terms of, you know, when I was in some of the camps with Joe Schmidt, it was very much, you know, Neil, you were talking about that pod of forwards, normally 3 forwards either off 9 or three forwards off 10. And you normally hit the middle forward, or like you were saying, Johnny, you give the tip on pass. Under Joe Schmidt, that's really all the only options we were allowed to do. You know, middle forward, either hit it up, give the tip on pass, or the pass out the back to the fly half coming around. It seems now, the way the game, their attacks evolved, there seems to be lots of different options they're using off that pod of forwards, off 9 or 10. And one of them is that either hitting the first or the second guy and giving the pass back inside rather than on the outside. So I think that's something Stuart Lancaster started to develop with Leinster play when I was finishing up in 2017, 2018. But seems there's a lot more kind of intricacies in those plays off 9 and 10, with, you know, a hard runner coming hard and putting it behind him. You know, Bundy a key drawing in 2 or 3 defenders running a hard line, and, you know, they seem to be creating and finding space.
And Mike, all of those, as you said, those little intricacies where, you know, as you said initially, it's either you take it up the middle or you pass inside or outside. But when there's another option out here and another option further back out here, like, ultimately, is it just keeping the defense honest for an extra half a second?
It's keeping the defense honest. And, you know, one of the ways of keeping the defense honest is, you know, sometimes you see a pod of forwards, and like you were talking about there, Johnny, the arrowhead, it's blatantly obvious the ball's going to hit the middle guy. So your defense just ramps up. And especially a team who defend like South Africa, where they love the line speed, they love that physicality, getting hard off the line. They send shooter, you know, you often see Faf de Klerk just flying out the line ahead of everyone else. He's got a license to do that. But I think, you know, the way it's developed is every forward in that pod of 3 has to be an option. You've got to ultimately look like you're all an option. So big thing with Joe Schmidt was the animation, getting your hands up, running at pace, looking like you're going to get the ball. So yeah, everyone has to look like they're a genuine option of getting the ball. And I think that hitting that third guy is definitely a tactic that was brought in, especially for the South Africa game, because, you know, South Africa, they don't really watch the ball, they just watch the man. So it's almost kind of as if they're trying to hit on suspicion. So they just try and number up, get off the line, and, you know, hitting that third defender was, I think, something definitely brought in for this game.
Mm-hmm. One of the frustrating elements then, particularly at the start of the game, was the line out. It's been an issue for a few months now, but 6 lineouts lost out of 18, but crucially 4 of those in the first 10 minutes and 4 of those in a row. And Mike, there was a mixture of reasons, it looked like, for what happened. You could see, first of all, South Africa were competing really, really hard. For a couple of those early ones, they were throwing up two pods to contest, and Ireland were trying to take James Ryan in the middle of the line out, and they just couldn't get the ball to him. It was such a difficult throw for Kelleher. There were a couple of other lineouts where Kelleher did overthrow it because he was trying to put it into such a precise spot. But from your opinion, what was going wrong in those first 10 minutes, and what can be done as a short-term fix leading into Scotland, and we hope a quarter-final onwards as well?
Yeah, obviously when you go into a game, you know, whatever position you're playing, and, you know, for, you know, when I was a forward, it was kind of your visualization of, you know, receiving that first kickoff. You know, clean catch for hooker, it's exactly the same. Your first scrum or your first line out throw, you know, you'll be doing a visualization of different areas of the pitch. So definitely to lose your kind of first 4 lineouts is going to put the jitters up you, and kind of, I think a lot of hookers have been there at some point or time in their careers, and especially the biggest kind of stage, the World Cup. Look, South Africa have got the best line-out defence probably in the world. The height, how rangy their forwards are. Steph Toy in the back row, what is he, 6'5", 6'6", some big timber in the second row. Ebenezer standing at the front of the line-out, staring you down. Coming off the bench, you've got RG Snyman, Jean Klein. Those guys are 6'8", 6'9". So first of all, they've got the height, they've got the athleticism, they've got the brains as well, in terms of, they're not just big brutes. They're clever. They've done their homework, so they probably know kind of where Ireland are looking to throw. First of all, when you do throw, when you're defending a line out or more in your own line, as South Africa were, it is very risky to put a pod up, let alone 2 pods, because if you don't win that ball or disrupt that ball, the team that's attacking catches the ball, they come down, and straight away there's the defending team's got 3 less players, 2 lifters and a jumper. So straight away the attacking team can get that momentum, get that little nudge on, which is so important at the start. Obviously you see a lot of teams just stay down. They sit back shoulder of the team that's throwing in. They sit back shoulder, so when the team wins the ball, they can just pile drive as many bodies early towards a touchline. That's obviously a different tactic, but South Africa backed themselves. They got 2 pods up, and I think you have to say the first couple, you can't really blame Ronan Kelleher. It was probably maybe a couple of poor options in the calling front, but also you just have to say good defence from South Africa. Maybe Ireland weren't expecting them to go up on the first one. And then probably the third and fourth one was a bit of the kind of the nervousness, the jitters coming in on the back of losing your first 2. So, I mean, Ronan Kelleher, he certainly set the tone in defence, didn't he? A huge hit in those early stages, which really set the tone of kind of that resilience and physicality that Ireland were going to bring to the game. But in terms of a fix for the line out, I think it is a small fix. It can be changed pretty quickly. Obviously you go back and focus on areas that didn't probably work as well as you can. You can imagine the brains trust of kind of Paul O'Connell, Simon Easterby, how those guys work, and the walkthroughs they'll be doing. One option is just to simply simplify your lineouts. You saw South Africa doing a lineout a lot of the game, which is basically, gives you free ball, easy ball. Ebenezer, I think it was Ebenezer at the front, preloaded on a 5-man, I think it was. The jack in the box, you keep your knees bent, preloaded. As the jumper goes, the hooker throws it. It's Ebenezer bet 1 countless ball that way. Now, what you're sacrificing there is winning the ball in the middle or the back. Ideal position to win the line out. But I think sometimes, maybe when the line out's not been going well, you just go to something that's simple, basic, and you're definitely going to win your first 2, 3, 4 line outs. So, I think simplifying things, often when a line out hasn't worked particularly well in a game, the menu will be reduced. So in terms of what's available to use, it'll just be reduced massively. So there's less to kind of learn. You become more familiar with that menu. And it's just repping it in training, just repping and repping and repping. There'll be a look at how because it's not, the hooker always gets the blame, don't they? But look, as we know, it comes down to the calling. Are they identifying where the space is? Are they calling the correct calls to get to find that space? What are the lifts like? Are the 2 lifters who are lifting the jumper, are they kind of at full tilt? Are they on their tiptoes? Are the 2 lifters walking towards each other? Everything it'll be looked at with a microscope. So look, I think it's a short-term fix. I think a bad day at the office line out wise, but definitely I think we'll just see a huge improvement there, because one area of improvement for Ireland from the previous game was they were getting penalised on their maul a lot for the lifters when they were setting up a maul, stepping round and blocking the defenders. So it was good to see they didn't get penalised for that. So I think it's a short-term fix that you'll see come to fruition in the next few games.
And Jonny, from a coach's point of view, you'd surely be reassured to see how they did manage to fix things on the fly, and they simplify, as Mike kind of said, they simplified their calls. They went to a lot of 5-man lineouts and just took the easy option of where is the space, we throw the ball there. And while it obviously doesn't allow you to to set up a really dominant maul or really attack South Africa in the dangerous places. It's just about securing the ball and you go from there. And to their credit, they worked it out on the fly. And for probably the last hour of the game, the lineout was perfectly functional.
Yeah, like it was impressive, right? Considering the losses that they had, it was a bit of a steep curve, you know. But like, they only lost, I think, 2 more for the rest of the game, didn't they? One of them came after Peter Manie turned over a lineout and Mostert turned it right back, you know. So, and I can't remember what the other one was, but
the other one was just a crooked throw.
Oh yeah, but like from a coaching perspective, it's hard because you're going into the start of the game, and maybe because of where the line it was, like Mike said, you don't know if South Africa are going to go up. But at the same time, I suppose South Africa do go up because they've ordinarily picked 2 quite tall second rows. They might put Mostert at 6. The last World Cup they were doing that quite a bit. They were putting a second row at 6, and they played Peter Steph Tutoit, who's like, you know, he is somewhere between 6'5" and 6'7". So they have a massive line out. So like, I think sometimes, you know, there's a small bit of, I wouldn't say there's ego in Ireland, in the Ireland camp, but I know from being a coach, you know, sometimes you're like, you know, we're just going to win our own ball in the way we want to win it, and you go for your best throw. But if you look back at some of the early lineouts, I think Pete was free on that, the one that Mike is calling like the jack in the box. I think he was free at the front of the lineout. Very easy to say in hindsight when they're stacked at 4 and 6 and they actually go up. I'd say you still don't expect them to go up, but there's another one. I think Bernard Jackman did quite a bit of analysis on it, and that's why I was saying a bit of cheating in at the front of the lineup, because Kitsoff was like not in the lineup. He was the 9th position, wasn't he? And there was someone at the back. Who was it at the back?
I'm not sure who was the back, but yeah,
it was Malherbe, Franz Malherbe,
and like
it was the 2 props.
It's technically illegal, isn't it? But like it's happening so fast that the ref's not going to call it. I'd say he doesn't even see it. You know, that's quite a technical thing for South Africa to do in the defensive lineup.
I double checked. I saw it this morning. Birch tweeted out. I double checked him. According to him, anyway, it is legal if the switch is made and the referee is told about it before the throw comes in. Now you're probably splitting hairs as to the timing of when it happened, but look, you're pushing the boundaries of those things like all good teams do.
Yeah. But I think they did fix it, and I think Ian Henderson coming on, the lineout had been sorted at that stage. They did go to 5 men. I think Pete took it. Pete's a very good lineout option as well for a guy that's not caught in their lineout. He takes a lot of pride in the lineout as well, learning a lot from Paulie Bacalon. But from an attacking perspective, I think Ireland don't actually do a whole load of like full-on strikes off the top of a lineout anyway. So like you'd be surprised that they wanted to go for their best lineout, because they normally take it down into a maul and have a breakout play or use the maul itself. Or you've seen them quite a bit as well, you know, throw the ball to the front and then their winger steps in and they use the winger going out towards their centre, and they have that kind of like 2 of them coming at the line with the 10 at the back. So they actually are prepared for having to win the ball at the front, and it's surprising that they didn't expect that to come from South Africa straight away, and that they would have just secured their ball and got into their rhythm, because they're a team that plays off the kind of phase play stuff and the unstructured quite a bit more than what they rely on their set piece with. But again, that's hindsight, and I think if they went back and started that game again, if they go into a final together, I don't think they're going to go for the middle back of the lineout at the start. I think they'll feel their way into the game without getting kind of their confidence gone. So they do have and I think that's why we see a lot of them. You know, it comes down and the 7 or the hooker breaks out. Sheehan or Van der Fleer does it quite a bit. You know, so they do have a lot in their bank of plays that they don't actually need ball off the top like that. You know, so but it was class from South Africa. I mean, the detail you're going into there that we don't even fully understand. I certainly don't fully understand. Mike does. But it's there's a lot of detail there trying to second guess what the opposition's trying to do, and maybe it's just because of where the line it was that they didn't expect South Africa to put 2 pads in the air. But the one thing I was thinking there is that, like, go 3-0 up early on against South Africa, a team that you need to stay ahead of. I was surprised they actually went to the line. It was a very kickable kick for Sexton, and I know they wanted to go for the 7 points, and maybe it was a statement, but 3 points was easily on offer, wasn't it? And they went 3-0 down instead of being 3-0 ahead.
Well, you've teed it up nicely, and I've teed it up nicely as well by talking about teeing things up nicely. Let's talk about kicking, because that is the other major talking point coming from the game, it seems. Is it too simplistic, to be honest, Jonny, though, to say South Africa make their kicks, they win? Like I was writing yesterday, for example, if you really want to get into it, we'll say the Faf de Klerk kick, for example, where he hits the post. South Africa's try a couple of minutes later pretty much comes as a direct result of him hitting the post and the ball rebounding down. South Africa win it. It leads to a scrum and they march Ireland back twice and score a try from it. And then another one of the kicks is the conversion from that anyway. So if Faf de Klerk puts that between the posts, a try doesn't arrive. Maybe it arrives a little bit later, but there's so many ifs and buts as an example. What's your opinion on it? The other flip side then as well, and I think you mentioned it in your column as well, is it's probably too easy to say Andre Pollard comes in and they win the game because he's a better kicker, because also you kind of have to weigh up the fact that is Manie Libbok moving the Irish defence around and testing the Irish defence more than Andre Pollard is going to.
Yeah, like you can say that Andre Pollard comes in and they win the game, but like they have to get him up to speed, first of all, in terms of match play, because he hasn't played a whole lot, 80 minutes in the last while, but at club level. And then you also have to make him Manie Libbok from phase play, who can kick the ball and land it in a, you know, on a sixpence kind of job. He can kick from anywhere. And I know we saw the no-look kick, which I think is a bit of, you know, it's a bit flamboyant. You're watching the ball go to your foot and then you look away as you're kicking the ball. Like, I think it's I think it was a bit overplayed, but like he did that with the Stormers. He was unbelievable at some of his kick passing and stuff like that. So like obviously that has a full effect on the defense of how they come up, how they watch their edges, and how the backfield is covering and all that kind of stuff. So you can't really just reduce it down to goal kicking. But I like what you said there, because I'm always thinking about missed kicks, and maybe I've been there too often, but like a missed kick makes the whole game play out differently afterwards. You can't say it's the same game, because like you said there, it was directly related to their try, but also decision making is completely different from there. Ireland mightn't do the same things, South Africa mightn't do the same things. You can't say there was X amount of points left on a tee. Now, I do think that Manie Libbok's goal kicking is like it has already has cost him to a degree, and it's going to cost him going the whole way to a World Cup. You know, so I actually thought Faf de Klerk would kick. You know, and then his first one was from just over the halfway, and he hit the post with it. I mean, he was so close to it. I think he's a better kicker than Manie Libbok, so I was surprised that he didn't kick in the first place. But when you look at Manie Libbok, like what he's missing is he's not missing from touchlines. Like he's missing very, very kickable kicks, and
it's interesting actually. I don't know, did you see it? I'd recommend looking it up if you didn't. But John Cooney is doing a column for World Rugby at the or Rugby World magazine at the moment, and he just had a nice simple column this morning talking about how Manie Libbok seems to be pulling the majority of these kicks to the left, and if you look at it, I actually even noticed it in one of those on Saturday night. Like this is how obvious it seems to be. But when he's teeing up that ball, every single one of those balls is it's lining up outside the left of the post, and he's pulling it.
It's horrible to look at, but like I think there's a couple of reasons with any of these things. You can get away with 90% of your kick being right, and sometimes there's something like this is wrong. So like John Cooney alluded to the fact that a lot of French and Argentinian kickers fall off the ball, like we'd always say, fall away from it. So they're moving away from the post to a degree. Now Lee Halfpenny does that, but he actually goes through the ball on a kind of sideways motion. So his weight is going through the ball. So there's a number of things I think in Manie Libbok's kick that you can't say it's one thing or the other, because I think there's two major issues on it. One thing is the ball, absolutely, but if he tees the ball up either with the seam down the middle of the post or with the seam slightly away to the right hand post, there's two ways of doing that. There's no right way or wrong way. But opening up the ball the other way would be seen to be given more of a sweet spot for a connection on the ball. And that's what John Cooney's alluding to. But a lot of people go straight down the middle of the post. Nobody from there is going to the left post. I just think that I'd love to know the explanation or why it's being done, because when I'm on the pitch with lads kicking and I'm standing in behind, it's the first thing you're looking at. Where's their body teeing it up to? Where's the ball being teed up to? And that doesn't look nice. But I don't like his action of falling away from the kick anyway. Because his weight isn't going through it. So whether the ball, like I said, 90% could be right. So you could have the ball set up poorly, but if you kick through that and your body finishes through it, then maybe we're not even talking about the ball placement because the ball went over the bar. So one of those two things, they can't both be happening at the same time, in my opinion. I don't, and everything coming left of that post from the left-hand side off his right foot, you know, his body weight has just swung exactly to where the ball has been left of the post, you know. So there's a couple of things that make it kind of not really nice to look at from a kicking perspective.
Mike, you agree with all of that on the kicking, yes?
Yeah, I was just going to say that obviously adds too much to kicking technique, but
Mike Burns' big long one down the middle of the pitch, like that
exactly.
one.
Yeah, I think I did a conversion at school once, but yeah, look, just aside from the kicking technique, it just seems, I suppose, from South Africa's point of view, I don't know, was it a trial, was it a test? They have obviously taken confidence from, you know, that 7-1 bench split where they hammered New Zealand at Twickenham in one of the warm-up games before the World Cup, and you know they've come into this game 7-1 split, no out-and-out kicker as you've spoken about with Libbok there, but I think their learnings going forward are, you know, if this is a World Cup final, they're obviously, you know, they're probably not going to go through for those same tactics. It just seems crazy. Yeah, like two of the kicks, like you said, Faf de Klerk were within their own half. So, you can't say they would have got those 6 points and would have been a changing point. I think in terms of changing one thing Ireland will definitely look at is the end of the game, where their discipline was really good, less than 10 penalties. I think they gave 9 penalties away. You always say less test match level, less than 10 penalties. You've got, if you give more than 10 penalties, it's very difficult to win a test match. But that last penalty, I think Dan Sheehan gave it away. They kicked to the corner and, it was touch and go as to whether I don't know what the referees pinged, because it looked like the ball was there. So I don't know if he's pinged the 9 for going in on his knees to dig the ball out, but it looked like the ball was there. So, from my perspective, that is a little bit of a let off, because I'm not sure, that ball probably maybe was the wrong decision by the referee.
What I saw a lot of people pointing out, and it probably makes sense, is that if you look at when the ball initially goes to ground, Ben O'Keefe, the referee, he runs in to have a look on the open side of the pitch, can't see the ball appearing, and then he goes around to the far side to have a look, and he can't see the ball appearing. But while he's on the far side, the ball has appeared on the inside. So, like, he probably actually has spent too long looking for the ball, and eventually it appeared. So,
I mean, if he blew the whistle, I think it blows the whistle too late. If he'd blown the whistle kind of earlier, it would have made more sense.
Yeah. Because the ball wasn't coming out. He actually, I think it's blocked by Cobus Reinek's leg when he goes around the other side, but it was so long waiting for it to come out. Other referees blow that really quickly. So I don't think it was the wrong decision in the sense. It just seemed really harsh because the ball was eventually there, and if it was in the middle of a game out the pitch, the ref would just leave it play on. So I think it is a bit of a funny one. But you see with the kicking and the ball hitting the post, wasn't that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that sequence was when James Lowe picked up Eben Etzebeth, got the turnover for the maul, so into the scrum. They brought on half that bomb squad, scrum penalty. Was it something along those lines? Or the ball got rushed out of the scrum and Ireland got turned over. So after I went for the scrum again, absolutely obliterated the Irish scrum. And that's when Manie Libbok actually got the ball out the back of a sweet pass from De Allende. He actually, I think, could have ran in himself because Hugo Keenan was doing the goalkeeping at that stage. He was in no man's land because Ireland actually hit a man early, I think, a man narrow, and I think he could have ran in himself or passed the ball over the top. So directly coming from that, like you said, but Mike kind of alluded to there as well the last couple of minutes, Ireland gave away the penalty from Dan Sheehan to go into the corner. I just thought they were creaking. If that game went on 5 more minutes, I think South Africa would have found the solution. They were giving up gain line after gain line, and they were finding the answers. I think Robbie Henshaw was class. Conor Murray was very good around there. Beelan was very good as well, getting off the line, but they were absolutely creaking. I remember when I'm watching the games, I'd be taking down 1 or 2 things, and I was like, oh my good God, we're creaking. It was just gain line, and you can't keep that up for too long.
Jonny, I can't understand why, because South Africa's biggest weapon is their maul. I can't understand why, Faf de Klerk didn't, they didn't go for the corner and just try and build on what their biggest weapon is their maul. Look, we can see how important it is and how massive it is in the context of any test match of taking your opportunities when you're 5 meters out. We saw it in, I think was the game yesterday, Wales Australia, not yesterday, on Sunday, where Australia were trying to get back in the game. They had the line out in Wales's 22, and it was an absolute shambles of kind of movement. It was a comedy of errors, and they lost the ball. Next thing, Wales are down on their try line. So, on the flip side, Wales had, I think, a 13-man line out towards the end of the game and scored from it because they're precise, they're accurate. There's such high stakes on those lineouts, 5 meters out. But yeah, I can't understand why they didn't just back themselves. South Africa, go for the corner. Big, heavy, strong men. The maul is their biggest weapon, and I'm not sure why they didn't go to it more.
Right on that, isn't it? Like, I think when you're out there 50 plus meters, you're kind of thinking we could go for goal here and take away 3 points, or the momentum shifts if you miss it and you have to catch a restart. If you're gone inside the 22, it's still time spent in play inside the opposition 22, going to a maul with big men, or good kind of technical pack as well within that, But I think the last thing on this, because I know you want to move on to Wales Australia, but Manie Libbok, for all we're saying about his goal kicking, the last kick that he put in, was it from close to halfway? He put it into the 5. It's the reason they had that last opportunity. If he put that to the 22, Ireland will just pin that maul, and I don't think there's going to be a whole lot coming from it. But he put it into the 5, and close to the 5 anyway. And Ireland looked like they panicked. They didn't have, a lot of time in there, the way we didn't see South Africa do it. You see that they don't put anyone up. They attack the middle of it. They pin the edges, and the rest is too technical for me. But like Ireland were one in the air, one off the side. They weren't together in that maul. It absolutely shocked me. I thought they were going to lose the game.
Lads, you've had your opportunity to talk about kicking technique and backs plays. One thing I just very likely to bring up very quickly, if I may.
Yeah.
A massive play by Ireland on the scrum when they're on their own line and they get the penalty. Now, I know John Fogarty from coaching scrums at Leinster. That is kind of a rabbit out of the hat magician. One trick you can have up your sleeve to use in a game when you're on your own line, you're under pressure. And I think a lot of teams use it, but I remember using it with John Fogarty when I was at Leinster. It's, you're on your own line, you've got your scrum, it's your put in, but there's a call. And that call means to everyone that on the engage, no one engages. And what it means, everyone's on the same page. So, Ireland go down for the scrum on the engage, they don't actually engage. And what it makes it look like is everyone's doing the same thing. So it just looks like the opposition have gone early, and that's how they get the penalty. It's very clever, very simple. But, as long as everyone buys into it, as long as the back row aren't shunting the second row and the second row aren't shunting into the front row. I mean, Jonny, your forward pack probably use it. I don't know with the team you coach, but it's a golden oldie. But bloody hell, it worked.
You couldn't possibly be suggesting there's some shenanigans going on at a scrum, Mike, are you?
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, it's. I was watching it. I was like, I completely forgot about it, and I saw it, and I was like, that just reminded me. There's a call gone in there, and everyone's on the same page. It's, as I say, you can use it in one game. You wouldn't get away with doing it again. It's too obvious, but it definitely worked.
Well, we talk about it, I might move on after this, but we spoke earlier on about the chain reaction of a kick hits the post, rebound leads to a South African try. That free kick that Ireland won 5 meters out from their own try line just after 70 minutes, it was after Dion Fury's crooked throw. So that free kick that they won from maybe not taking the hit, they go up the pitch, they turn over South Africa, Tyg Byrne kicks the ball down, they force Jack Crowley's drop goal, gets deflected, Ireland have a 5 meter scrum, and South Africa shove early again. And because it's been a free kick 2 minutes earlier down the other end of the pitch, Ben O'Keefe is upgrading it to a penalty this time round, and Jack Crowley puts it between the posts, and Ireland are leading by 5.
And it actually came from a reversal of Ireland doing it. The first scrum, I think Porter went early free kick, didn't he? And
he in fairness to O'Keefe, he was consistent with it, because right at the start of the game he gave a free kick against Ireland and then went penalty straight afterwards on the next scrum. So
Tyg Furlong penalty then, and Tyg Furlong was kind of looking around. So maybe there was tricks of the trade going both ways, knowing that Ireland were going to load up early to try and deal with
the dark arts, Jonny.
Hopefully they haven't blown their cover. Hopefully haven't blown their cover if they want to try it again later on in the tournament.
James Lowe was counting the clock down, wasn't he? It got to within 2 seconds.
Was he counting it?
Yeah, apparently James Lowe, if you look at
Crowley, sorry.
Oh, so, yeah, but James Lowe was counting, wasn't he? He was apparently. I read this morning James Lowe was stood right next to the kicker.
Oh,
and he was counting down for him, and got to within 2 seconds. So it's obviously pretty close.
Brilliant. We're nearly out of time, lads. So I might move it on quickly to Australia and Wales from Sunday night, which was engrossing in its own way, just to see Australia crumble and Wales just grow in confidence as the game goes on. We'll go into it in a bit more detail later on in the week in our second podcast, because we won't have an Ireland game to look ahead to. But Jonny, it's been fascinating to see Eddie Jones and Warren Gatland both coming into jobs with struggling teams at the same time, close to a World Cup, and to see the different roads that those two teams have gone down has been fascinating, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been, but I think it was set up for Wales to be able to. Now it was set up for Eddie Jones in the same boat, but I think with Gatland and Wales' squad and the physicality that they can bring, he was going to be able to get them through to a quarter final with a small bit of cohesion. But I think when you look back at it, the reason I said it wasn't a great test match was obviously because of the standard of play, standard of individual performances around. There were a load of reasons why, but if you look at the first play where Dan Biggar kicked the ball in behind, he had 2 numbers over on the edge, I think, on the left hand side, and it was obviously just kind of game management, get into their half and put some pressure on, and we'll start eking out a couple of points, and I think that went out throughout the game. There was was a couple of moments where you're like, that's so cheap. And the fact that Dan Biggar wasn't looking to play at first, the camera went on him, and I think he's looking at someone outside being like, I know, yeah, I was actually on to go, but obviously it's so programmed that they're going for territory, put the squeeze on. I think at one stage in the game it popped up that they had 100 odd tackles and Australia had between 20 and 30. I can't remember the stat properly. And it just showed that they didn't have the ball for all the scoring that they were doing. It's just transfer of pressure that they're at. And it's a typical Warren Gatland kind of game plan. When you don't really have the cohesion in attack, which they clearly didn't. It was either static and that pot of three doing absolutely nothing, with Garrett Anscombe kind of shifting it, waiting for the next phase. Whereas you see someone like Ireland or even Scotland, they're playing within that phase and making teams make decisions. Wales didn't do that. They went to kick, contest in the air, maul, driving back, win penalties, kick your points. And that's what they did for most of the game. So, like, I'm not saying you're not allowed to do that. It's a very effective game plan. South Africa had a very kind of similar transfer of pressure to win a World Cup in the last World Cup, but they actually explode when they get the turnover. I'm not sure Wales have that explosion when they do it, even to the point where I think I saw, trying to pick these things up without actually knowing their game plan at all, or without knowing their calls. But you see George North as a 13 is tagging onto the edge of a forward pod from first phase, second phase, third phase. It just feels like one of those kind of the last decade you were given like 3-phase pattern plays, and the 13 will show up out here, and it's just about ball retention until the other team give up, in a sense. And I think it was just the last bit I'll say is that it was fairly evident that I can't remember who it was. Valentini was it when he dived on the ball outside of the ruck, and he gave away the penalty in front of the goal
towards the end of the first half.
My God, like we still see it at club level. It is happening, but like Wayne Barnes had to tell them, and you can hear that there's a conversation going on behind the screen. These are the laws. And the ball is out, yes, but even if the ball is out, it has to be gone with further than a meter from the ruck for you to be able to dive on the ball, run in and pick it up all you want. It's not offside because the ball is out. And I was kind of like, it was even on the commentary they were trying to figure it out. And I think it might have been 2 or 3 seconds out of the ruck before you can pick it up. And I was like, it's a meter, it's 1 meter, it's in the laws. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you now, Johnny, I played J4 rugby, and in the WhatsApp group of a few friends of mine that are playing, like, there was a handful of people in that group saying, how on earth does he not know the law by now? Like, you don't need to be a professional to know this sort of stuff at this stage. Like, this is lads in their mid-30s playing Division 9 Metro, like.
But it can, the pressure will get to you, and you're eager to get your hands back on the ball. So I understand possibly giving the penalty away, but the questioning, well, I don't understand it fully because you should be tuned in, but like I can understand why it happened. It's the questioning afterwards I was kind of going, it was like England back in the Italy game when they were saying, but is that not offside? And I think the Sexton one at the beginning where he's saying you can't coach them to not be offside. It's like they were looking for Wayne Barnes to coach them on what the laws were, and you're way too far gone if that's the case in the middle of
a kind of penalty I would have given away in my time, I think. So, but I think just on the Wales Australia game, I think it just shows with Warren Gatland. I mean, he's got a track record of performing at World Cups, hasn't he? Time in the seat, time in the saddle. He came in, a lot of pressure, wasn't going well. It's the same you look to when Joe Schmidt left. Andy Farrell, questions being asked. Mike Catt coming from Italy as attack coach, questions being asked. They bring Paul O'Connell into the coaching ticket, and that seems to be an added ingredient to the recipe of speeding up the breakdown, more vicious, more nasty at the breakdown. So, I think the arguments to keep Eddie Jones are that he hasn't had time to prepare them properly. Is there anyone better that they can put in place to kind of take over? But from Wales' perspective, even still, Mike Forshaw, he coached me at Connacht. He was defence coach at Connacht. Great fella, great coach. That was his first kind of union coaching gig. Went on to Sale Sharks, and the defence to me looked like an old Sean Edwards defence. Great defence. Yeah,
it felt the exact same. I thought of Sean Edwards, so they're gone back to their old recipe.
That brick wall, that red brick wall, speed to feet, people getting on their feet, working their backside off, getting up off the feet, off the ground, giving them width in their defensive line, well connected, getting off. Great shape in the defence, and I actually thought watching the game, I thought, well, geez, Australia are up for this. They're running hard, they're running direct, they're winning collisions. But they just couldn't, and they were going to multi-phase. They were getting into high phase count, but they just couldn't break down that Welsh defence. It was absolutely incredible. But
they felt very individual, didn't they? And that's, I think, the difference between Warren Gatland and Eddie Jones. I think, in fairness to Eddie Jones, I know his game plan isn't, it's not unbelievably positive either, but like he does have those Australian guys trying to make decisions, and he's trying to play within the strengths of the team. They have obviously very good backline as well, but I think Warren Gatland was like, no, like we're going into the maul, we're going to maul you 20 meters twice. I think in the game they did that, which is absolutely embarrassing for Australia in a crunch match like that for your maul to get walked. Whereas I don't think Warren Gatland would allow that to happen to his pack. I think you'd have them so tough defensively, like Mike said as well. It's all the nuts and bolts of the game that he gave them. And then the rest of it will come as the tournament goes on. If they are to go there, I think they will pick up, Josh Adams and Liam Williams will have moments but I don't think Australia went the right way around it. They wanted to play all the rugby without having the nuts and bolts in place. And that's why you're seeing different kind of.
What about Gareth Anscombe's performance? I mean, the injury setbacks he's had with his knee injury, being out for so long. You see Dan Biggar go off early, and I was thinking, wow, God, that's a huge loss. But yeah, I think Anscombe was absolutely incredible. Marshaled the game, cool, calm, collected, identified space, put the ball there, just completely ran the ship. It was kind of like you want to have that depth, that quality. It was like, Dan Biggar's like equivalent of a Johnny Sexton. It's like having a Johnny Sexton coming on for a Johnny Sexton. It was, I think that's a brilliant place for Wales to be in terms of having two brilliant fly halves.
He went to that game, Mike, didn't he, with the kick for Tompkins to under a post? I think he was just humming at that stage. But there was bits that I kind of looked at. They had them all and they walked forward, and I think they had the penalty advantage, and you could see from the behind camera that there was someone after breaking down right, there was someone after running ahead for a kind of a hit line off the 9. Gareth Anscombe got it at the back and tried to kick it to Josh Adams. It was just in touch, but that was one of those moments where I felt like they weren't on the same page in attack. They were, penalty advantage, what are we going to do? Everyone does different things, and if that was someone who was further down the tracks, I think they would have had a better answer for that penalty advantage. Now, I liked the kick, and it was very nearly on the money, and he obviously had a better kicking game with that one under the post with Tompkins. So I think Gareth Anscombe, like Micah said, was on the money. I think he grew into the game very nicely, but I think he's got a bit more to his game in terms of how to play the space a small bit better, and I think the cohesion isn't fully there. But like I said, the nuts and bolts of Warren Gatland are there, and they're going to cause trouble.
Yeah, and it's either way, it's going to take a good, well-organized team to knock them out of the tournament. Even if they're not the best team in the world, you're going to have to be on it if you want to beat them, because the way they're organized. Fellas, that's all we have time for. I need to wrap this up because I need to go.
Scotland game, guys. Never mind.
That's the water after knocking yours all over your room.
We have 10 days to build up to Scotland. I need to go clean a glass of blackcurrant squash that I knocked over about 5 minutes into the podcast. Just a reminder, plenty of games coming up on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player over the next few days. Japan against Samoa on Thursday night, 8 o'clock kickoff. We also have on Saturday, Argentina against Chile at 2 o'clock. That's followed on Saturday by Fiji against Georgia. And then on Sunday on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player, we have South Africa against Tonga. That is an 8 o'clock kickoff from Marseille. Jonny and Mike, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a million for joining us on the podcast. What did you say? I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I think I'm muting myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just said...
It didn't come out. You're shouting too loud, if anything, Mike.
Oh, yeah. Well, lads, thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Goodbye.
The RTÉ Rugby World Cup podcast, sponsored by Bank of Ireland.